is a lot of people think, hey, weed is better than getting drunk. Right? If I get high, I'm just going to sit at home and I'm going to eat Doritos and I'm going to play video games and no one gets hurt. But weed in a lot of ways is emotionally and mentally addictive, where people rely on it to escape, to cope, and to deal with their stress. Hey everyone, my name is Adam Cross, and I am an associate marriage and family therapist in Southern California. I'm also a Catholic youth minister at my parish here, and today I'm going to talk about weed. Yeah, so let's talk about weed. So my first experiences as a marriage and family therapist trainee right out of grad school were working with perpetrators of domestic violence. So I work with mainly male perpetrators, and so these were guys that were arrested for usually physical abuse, but a lot of verbal, mental, emotional abuse as well. And they were put in a court-mandated group, 52 weeks, with a bunch of other guys, and we would have group therapy sessions with them. Very quickly, running these groups, I learned a couple things. And one of them was that most of their incidents of abuse, where the cops were called, they were under the influence, and most of them were drinking. So they were drunk, and they got abusive. The second thing I realized was that most of these guys, if not all of them, were smoking weed and marijuana very regularly. And so the conversations quickly led to this, and even some of the therapists had different things to say about it. I would hear from these guys in the group, I've never been aggressive when smoking weed. Or weed helps me calm down when I'm really stressed or agitated or irritated with my girlfriend or my wife or my kids. And so there was kind of this idea put forth that, hey, weed is better than alcohol, and weed actually helps to prevent us from being aggressive. And that was kind of what was put forth. And as I went through the group more and more, and I was certified and I ended up leading the groups, I realized that wasn't the case. And here's why. And I think this is a very common misconception. Is a lot of people think, hey, weed is better than getting drunk. Right? If I get high, I'm just going to sit at home and I'm going to eat Doritos and I'm going to play video games and no one gets hurt. Right? And we have this image of drunk driving or aggressive drunks, and that's true, right? That it can be the case. But weed is still affecting how people deal with stress, anger, and anxiety. And here's what I found. A lot of times when people are smoking weed, they are smoking to avoid or escape the stress, the anxiety, the anger that's coming up with whatever it is. If it's relationships, work, school, family, it could be anything. But people usually smoke to get some sort of escape. And the guys I was working with, they would admit it. They'd say, when I'm stressed, I go smoke a bowl. When I'm anxious, I'll go get high. And that was their escape. And so for them, it seemed like it was a good option. But what we found, and what I've seen working in groups, is that when people are smoking weed, every time they are stressed, anxious, angry, anytime they have a negative emotion, they're turning to weed, what happens? Well, they stop learning the necessary coping skills that a mature adult would have, right? And they replace those mature coping skills with smoking weed. So what happens when they can't smoke weed? They do not have the coping skills in place to handle stress and anxiety and anger as they should, as a mature adult would. So weed, in a lot of ways, prevents people from growing emotionally and mentally. There's a lot of new research out there what long-term weed use does to the brain, especially with new types of synthetic weed and things like that. But even without that, emotionally, it stunts our growth. And we don't always think about that in terms of emotional intelligence. But if we don't know how to cope and we don't learn how to deal with negative emotions, then we're more likely to blow up, or we're more likely to be extremely anxious and stressed all the time. So weed might not be chemically addictive in the same way alcohol is, right? Where the body actually has withdrawals from alcohol. But weed in a lot of ways is emotionally and mentally addictive, where people rely on it to escape, to cope, and to deal with their stress. So that was one of the main things I saw in these perpetrators groups, was that, weed might calm them down in the moment, but then when they don't have the weed to rely on, to fall back on at work, they're more likely to not know how to handle negative emotions and just life stresses in general. They're more likely to lose their jobs, or to be aggressive, or just to feel really anxious in social situations. So weed isn't going to be the source of all that stress and anxiety, but it can kind of cover it up in some ways. And it's really avoiding looking at the root of the problem and looking at what's going on, looking at why we're feeling anxious or stressed or irritable, which is a part of growing up, which is a part of being an adult, understanding why we do what we do. So weed has an interesting role in society, in how we deal and cope, and there's a lot of controversy around it right now. There's a lot of interesting studies coming up, but it can prevent us from understanding what is going on with us, and it can prevent us from maturing and building healthy coping skills to deal with negative emotions and difficult life events. It's a myth out there. I just kind of want to talk about it. But if you have any comments, if you have any ideas on this, I'd love to hear them in the comments and see what you guys have found or encountered with that. So that's a little bit about weed. Thank you for watching. Feel free to give this video a like or share it around. Feel free to subscribe and let me know if you have any questions. You can email me on my website or give a comment below. But thank you for watching, and God bless.